Evan, it is so great to have you here for Music Talk. Hello, everyone. I'm joined by Evan Mitchell, who is the conductor this week with the SSO. Welcome to Saskatoon.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I should say welcome back to Saskatoon.
It's great to be here again.
Yes. So we'll dig into the concert this weekend, but I want to talk. Last year, you were here and you guided us through our very first Harry Potter film.
That's true.
And that won you a very special place in the hearts of my orchestra because it went so well. Everybody was just like stressed.
Yeah.
Those Harry Potter shows are work.
They're incredibly challenging. Yeah.
And you came in, you had it all planned out. You managed your time so well. The orchestra was so thrilled with it. So that was like, okay, how soon can we have him back? And
and
here you are.
Thank you. Here I am.
You've done a few of those Harry Potter shows. They are a lot.
They are a lot. I have done all 8 of the films.
All 8.
Yeah. Most of them several times. I think there are 1 or 2 that I've only done the one time, and but I have all of them under my belt. Yes, it's true.
Wow. They're a lot of work.
They're a lot of work. Yeah.
For both you and the orchestra.
Yeah. I mean, it's I personally think, not to steer the topic too far away from the concert at hand, but I feel like this format is actually pretty much the greatest thing to happen to orchestral pops.
Yep.
As long as I've been doing this, I think everybody wins. It's a challenge, but at the same time, it's really rewarding. Audiences love it. Generally speaking, the orchestras love it, and I have yet to be tired of the quite frankly the magical element of the fact that essentially I have the video up there giving me sort of cues as to where I should be, so I'll know if I'm ahead, on time, or behind. I adjust accordingly. But from the orchestra's perspective, it's just some person on the podium waving their arms, and that's all it takes to be able to have it be in perfect sync with the picture. It's miraculous.
It is really, everybody wins because the orchestra, I mean, it's always a challenge, those Harry Potter films. Some of the Disney films are, the Alan Menken, the ridiculous, but you feel a sense of accomplishment.
Oh, absolutely.
And also the second the audience screams, it's just the best.
It's worth it, yeah.
It's
and
the best.
There are some really raucous audiences.
There really are, yeah. So we're thrilled to have you back. And thank you for joining me today here at Dervilla for Music Talk.
Oh, I'm delighted.
We do this ahead of the concert. We've been doing it, I think, 11 years now, and it's just a fun time to talk about the concert. Let's talk a little about you first. You are music director in Kingston.
That's right.
At the beautiful Isabel Bader Center.
It is a beautiful hall, yes.
It is a beautiful hall and a great facility, right there on the water. It's sort of the dream facility for most orchestras.
I would certainly say it's as perfect a hall for us as we could imagine or hope for.
Yeah. How long have you been music director there?
I think this is my 11th season there. Yes.
There you go.
Yes, yeah.
So we have a similar timeline at our orchestras.
That's true.
Yeah,
yes.
There you go. That's an incredible thing. Now, not a lot of music directors in their 11th year in Canada right now.
I suppose not. I mean, the thing that's not to be like, oh, boo-hoo, poor conductors, but you do have a bit of a shelf life because I think it took me a while to put my finger on it. I think eventually you lose the capacity to surprise your orchestra members.
Right.
Audience members, it lasts a little bit longer because they see you for the concert, but they don't see you for the rehearsal process, of course.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that we're still surprising each other in Kingston. So no,
you do some great programming.
Well, thank you.
I mean, I knew it was so funny when you were here for Harry Potter last year. It was so funny because I think on the original, documents we get from the Warner Brothers folks, it was somebody else's name. There's a guy who does like all the Harry Potters, and his name is on all the contracts. And then like 2 days before the show, someone on my staff goes, "Oh, Evan Mitchell's the conductor," and I was like, "Evan Mitchell, like." I feel like I know who this is. Yeah. And I walked in and was like, oh, I do know who you are because I've loved your programming out in Kingston. I think you do a lot of new music.
Yes, we do.
And we do a lot of new music.
Yes, you do.
We do a lot, so that's a great fit. What is it that draws you to that type of programming? Like you were just talking. You did the Ligeti violin concerto.
That's right. Yeah,
which is not something that is on a lot of programs.
No.
But you do a lot of Canadian new music. What is it about that draws you and the orchestra to it?
That's a great question. It's a complicated question. I think that it's sort of the partner question to that is why are certain audiences not as eager to take in new music as they used to be, which is also very complicated. And I think that we have a lot of music. We are lucky to have just hundreds of years of some of humanity's greatest geniuses creating their spectacular art, and it's preserved, and it is timeless by definition. Mozart symphonies written hundreds of years ago.
It's still good.
It's still good. I just did the Jupiter literally a couple of days ago, the 41st Symphony, and it was I could never tire of it. And that's the power of great art, that timelessness. There is often a perception, I feel, from people who may or may not know better, that that comes with sort of a little bit of baggage to say that, well, this is art from a long time ago.
Right.
And so is it stale? Is it passé? Does it reflect sort of the values, the idea, the zeitgeist? And, again, truly excellent, timeless art, in my opinion, does. But the sense of discovery is one of the most wonderful aspects of music making, in my opinion, that one can encounter. And as glorious as Beethoven's Ninth is, you discover it once and it can change your life. And then every time subsequently that you hear it, it's incredible, it's astounding, but you know what's going to happen.
Yeah, the discovery diminishes.
The discovery diminishes. And so, fortunately, we have all sorts of talented and wonderful genius artists in this country, and in fact all over the world, who are writing new music that can have that timeless quality, but at the same time, you get this wonderful sense of that discovery. And so I think that that's what drives me with my programming for pursuit of just good contemporary music, which is often written by Canadians.
Yeah, I liked when you were talking about surprise. I mean, a lot of the times when we're programming, working with conductors like yourself, talking about programs, trying to figure out where things are going, that element of surprise is so important for the audience, because some of them will come not knowing what to expect. And I think we have a lot of that on this weekend's program, which
we certainly do. I mean, it's a selling point.
It is a selling point, and there's some. I love that it's a mix of music. We were talking about how it kind of contains memories. And we're gonna let's first talk about the fact that we are celebrating concertmaster Michael Swan's 40th anniversary as concertmaster. Now,
how amazing is that? I mean, that's just
it's just wild. Like he started literally 2 years after I was born. Like it's an amazing thing to think about, that kind of life cycle.
Oh yeah, and an astonishing legacy that is already in existence that one can see and appreciate.
And extra special, Michael grew up here. So all sorts of, we have all sorts of people who come to our concerts who go, I took lessons with the same teacher as Michael at the same time, and I had someone say to me, I used to play against Michael in the festival and he always won. And so it's so exciting. When we were talking with Michael about doing a piece that was meaningful to him, he picked a concerto that he'd always wanted to do, the Wieniawski Concerto No. 1. This is a piece that doesn't get played very often.
No, it's true.
But it's kind of that old school romantic violin.
Oh, it's uber romantic. One of my right out of the gate, you're hit with an orchestral introduction that, if it were any further in that direction, would almost be stereotypical of just that really leaning into the uber romantic tradition for sure. Yeah,
and you can feel not only the era and the time that Wieniawski was writing it, but also like you can feel that European lushness to that orchestral. The way it's been written, it's not Strauss, it's not Wagner, but it's got that warmth to it.
No, and there's really there's a lot to be said for that. I very much enjoy pieces that sort of have that stamp, that watermark of the era and the location to a degree, of when they were written, where and when they were written, because then it becomes a time capsule.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a kind of the perfect time capsule for Michael, because it sort of suits. It's so Michael. It's hard.
Oh my goodness! It's you mentioned that I did the Ligeti last week, which is this fiendishly difficult piece, and the soloist was Mark Feuer, who passes along his love. He has a great love for the orchestra and for Saskatoon, and he said, "What are you doing next week?" And I said, "I'm doing Wieniawski No. 1." He said, "Oh, that's so hard," and I thought that's just the strangeness of that statement after having played this
Ligeti.
piece. But it is it's as soon as the solo violin enters, from there onwards, it's just insanity. It's the only way to really describe it, because of course it was a showpiece written for Wieniawski himself to showcase that he was just one of Earth's best violinists of his day.
Yeah. And the opening of the violin itself, if I recall, is fiendish.
That's right out of the gate.
Like it asks the most of you. It's funny. We just a couple weeks ago we did the Brooks Scottish Fantasy, which is also one of those pieces that's just stupidly difficult and violinists run from. We had Timothy Chewy here for it. So that was fun. And now we're doing this, and I'm like, whoa, there was two big ones right back to back.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure too. You probably have this idea. For those of you, a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. You know, you plan a season, you have this wonderful idea of the arc.
Yeah.
It's like, oh well, then we'll do this here, and we'll do this, and instantly it gets blown to pieces
Yeah.
by virtue of just availability or trying to pace things, or when you might have the hall is available, all these sorts of factors. Then you have to sort of reshuffle the pieces. So sometimes you end up with those things back to back, but it's wonderful. It's glorious. It's part of the joy, I think, of envisioning a season.
Right. It's funny you say that. So we launch our new season this coming weekend.
You do.
And I had to write the letter to go for donors and subscribers yesterday or the other day, and in it I talk about how a season is a puzzle. You've got these wonderful pieces, and now you have to put the puzzle together, and oftentimes the puzzle doesn't fit, and so you have to move a project ahead a year or back. There's all this. Somehow by accident, next season 95, if there was wood around me, I'd knock on it. So far, all the puzzle pieces have fit together. I said to the staff this morning, I think this is my 12th season to put on stage with the SSO. This is the first time in 12 seasons no one has emailed me a week or two beforehand to say, oh, my travel just changed. And
Yes, yeah.
Because there's always that, or like you say, the hall says, oh, whoops, we got something.
Next weekend.
Yeah. Can you move? There's been nothing yet. So
that's incredibly lucky. That's rare.
It's insanity.
Yeah.
I'm worried that I should step away from now on because it's like I've had the perfect scenario. But even with this, I mean, there's projects.
What else is left for me?
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to jinx it for next year. But like you say, there's a couple of projects on next season that have been in the works for 4 years.
And then when it comes to fruition, it's the most wonderful thing.
Yeah. It's incredible. Let's talk about the concerto a bit. What can people expect musically from those? It's three movements. The first movement is, of course, the classic. Let's show off everything.
Yep.
Let's talk about it. What can people lean into with it?
Well, so we talked a little bit about what to expect that is sort of, quote unquote traditional. It is cast in, I would say, a fairly typical format for concertos at the time. Three movements. The first movement is the most substantial. Actually, by itself is quite significantly more than half of the entire piece. The finale is likewise filled with fireworks. That's something that one would expect from a romantic showpiece concerto. The middle movement is entitled a prayer, and actually showcases, I think, Wieniawski's greatest compositional chops, purely as just a piece of music. There's some wonderful choices that he makes just with the color and with the pace of it all. The violin section as a whole comes in late in the movement, and the first violins actually get quite an extended break, which is an unusual thing. But the way that Wieniawski sort of stacks the orchestral colors makes for quite an astounding, very simple. But I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I think that it's simple and it's perfectly executed, and it has something to say. And in the midst of all, just like the ludicrous work that that Michael will be doing, it's a bit of a reprieve from that, and a reminder of the great musicianship that Wieniawski had outside of just having insane violin chops.
Aside from the fact that he was a virtuoso genius, he also musically had real flavor.
Yeah, and some of those things, those intangible elements, they're virtually impossible to teach. Yeah. You can recognize them when you see them, but it's not the sort of thing that you can really impart, because if you're doing it as a kind of an exercise, or if you're doing it and that intentionality of it, you lose something, and it becomes less. That sort of understanding it's very rare, and it's very ephemeral, and
It's funny. I'm sitting here thinking, is this the first time that it's been done here in Saskatoon? And hilariously, at the SSO, if you want to know when the last time we did a piece of music was, you ask Michael.
Oh yeah, I'm sure,
because he knows, and he'll tell you, oh, it was February of 1995, and
he strikes me as having
such a memory for those things. Like he's sort of our archive of performances. So I have to ask Michael that because it might be the first time we've done it here. So yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm excited to celebrate Michael because, I can't imagine that I know there's no concertmaster in Canada who's done it for 40 years. He's the longest in
Yeah.
Canada. I can't imagine that there are many anywhere really who've done it quite that long.
Yeah,
It's a
I
long
can't imagine
time.
either. It's one of those. It's a matter of perseverance and commitment, and a little bit of wonderful circumstance when he was first
Yeah.
coming to the orchestra as a young person,
Yeah.
and then to just stay and grow with the orchestra. It is absolutely something to be celebrated. So it's wonderful that we are.
Yeah, yeah, and it's going to be fun. A lot of his family are here for it.
That's
He's
great.
got tons of students coming, former students who've worked with him. It's really a beautiful experience. So,
Perfect.
if it is the first time, I think that makes everything on the program a premiere in Saskatoon because we open
Sure.
with work by your friend Ryan True.
That's right. Ryan True is a composer. He's based in Vancouver. Way back, further back than I'd care to admit. We were in our undergrad together, and I always knew that he had something special. You graduate, you go off, and your paths diverge. For this particular piece, it has an unfortunately sad genesis. This is a piece that was commissioned by my wife, Rachel, who is a magnificent soprano, and she lost her sister, Elizabeth, in 2012. She was a victim of the opioid epidemic, and the last couple of years, because of the nature of the substance abuse and addiction, they were very fraught. It was a contentious relationship the two of them had. Yep. And Rachel, of course, in the midst of this tragedy, wanted to reconnect to greater, happier memories of her sister. She wanted that to be how she looked back. And so Liz had aspirations of being a writer. She was a wonderful writer. She had even as a very young person, in fact, one of the texts for the song cycle from which the intermezzo we're about to play came from is I think something, a grade 4, a poem she wrote in grade 4 that she won an award for. So they're in her journals, in Elizabeth's journals, there are all sorts of wonderful poetic selections that Rachel curated a set of texts, a very unusual set of texts for a song cycle, and commissioned Ryan True to write the music for this song cycle based on Elizabeth's texts. And it was an incredibly challenging emotional needle to thread, as you can imagine, because you want to be able to celebrate, you want to be able to remember, you can't deny that there's a sadness there.
Yep.
And so all of these factors came together. Ryan, I really think, is the real deal. He has that particular talent. One of those great intersections is someone who has put in the hard work and has painstakingly taken the time to learn the craft of orchestration and melodic writing and these sorts of things, but also has that unteachable element of being able to imbue really complicated, really complex, yet innately human emotions, grief, nostalgia, faded memories, these sorts of things. So we're opening with the intermezzo from this song cycle, which happens at the midpoint, and it serves two purposes: to give the soprano a break after a lot of singing, but beyond that, to have a moment for the ensemble to shine. And the character of this particular movement is one that it's certainly in fond memory and remembrance of Elizabeth. So there is a little bit of that melancholy, but largely it's about holding on to the good times and keeping those close to one's heart, which I think it's really important. I mean, all of us have experienced grief.
Yeah, well, and you know, I mean, all of us. I don't know that there's a Canadian who doesn't know someone affected by the opioid crisis.
Oh, certainly. I mean, it's an incredibly huge problem.
It's an incredibly huge problem. Just in the last few weeks here in Saskatoon, I mean, last week I think we had 25 overdoses, and you know, I mean, and as you say, your sister-in-law passed away in 2012. This has been a crisis that's been going for
a very long time.
We're soon into our second decade of it.
Yeah.
And it's not getting better.
No.
And we're not talking about it properly, and we're not grieving about things properly, but we're also not solving it.
No, it's true.
And
I mean, it's a challenging time.
It's a very challenging time. It's a topic that I think a lot of people, for a very long time, were very quiet about just because of its stigmas. but I really enjoy that there are now people actually talking about it. That's where we're going to move forward.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, it's tricky. The impulse to sort of to want to cover, to be silent, to not speak about these things. It's the most understandable impulse as a human being. One can understand, and it takes a lot of bravery to be able to break away from that. I think. While you're right, we certainly haven't tackled this problem the way that we need to, by no means. We are now, I think, living in a time which is far more open about at least talking about these sorts of problems than we were even 10 years ago. Acknowledging the pain, acknowledging the tragedy, acknowledging the scope of the problem. And so, I choose we have to remain vigilant, but at the same time, progress is being made in that regard, and not that I'd call that necessarily the grassroots aspect of it, but I think the more that we're able to talk about it frankly, the more that we're able to, the more that change will be affected.
The more it will become part of what we do.
Ultimately.
Intriguingly, the whole concert sort of has this sense of memory about it, and it's funny. I remember having a phone call with you last year where we found our date. We were working, and I said, I really want to do this song cycle, The Lost Birds. So, a couple of years ago, I was actually going out. We were performing. The SSO was doing a concert out in Lloydminster. At the Vic Juba Theatre out there, and our director of digital marketing, Yash, he and I were driving in my car to go out and set up ahead of time. We were meeting people out there, and we listened on the drive up to this new recording. It had come out the day before, of Christopher Tin's The Lost Birds. And we got to Lloydminster, and we unloaded what was in my car, and we met with the people who were setting up, and the musicians were already on their way. And in the process of that evening, I sent a message to Christopher and said, like, how soon will this be available for orchestras to program? And he emailed back, and he's like, when do you want it? And I was like, soon. I want it soon. It's only 2 years old, 2.5 years old. And hilariously, in that exchange with Christopher, he's like, wait, Saskatoon, I've been there. I conducted your orchestra. He was actually here about 13 years ago.
Oh, really?
He was on tour at the time because, of course, he did a ton of work with Video Games Live. And he actually conducted the concert here with them.
That's so funny.
It was so funny. And he talked briefly about coming, but it wasn't going to work in his schedule. But it's such a... It was such an interesting connection to this piece. It choir and string orchestra with percussion. It's
harp too.
Harp as well. I will talk about it musically in a second. We'll talk about it politically in a second. But it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, no,
it's arrestingly beautiful.
It's astonishing, and it's one of those. There seems to be. We were discussing this prior to this conversation. There does seem to be a trend, I think, for certain composers to come and embrace once again this notion of. I don't want to say conventional harmony, but like the harmonic tradition. And there are certainly ways to be able to honor that and to fit within the rules of what we consider to be conventional harmony, and then at the same time have an entirely modern tonal language. And I think that's what Christopher Tin has achieved here. There's all sorts of moments in this piece where I have marked a little H in a box where there's a harmonic departure, where all of a sudden you can just bathe in it. Where there's a moment that I very much want to sort of put a bit of a stamp on there, because clearly that's his intention, and I think that's a very welcome trend. I love to hear it, and it's also personally it's great for me to see composers who are in all sorts of different media be successful. You obviously have a connection with him. Mine is a little bit further. There's a few more degrees of separation, but I actually earlier this year with my orchestra in Kingston, we did the concert premiere of a piece composed by Austin Wintory, who is a renowned multimedia composer, shall we say. And it turns out that he and Christopher are great friends. And so he happened to see a poster and snapped a shot of that. I'm just like, this is so interesting that there's all these connections. But yeah, I mean, this is just, it's the modern age, and great minds and great musical minds and great musical souls can gravitate to a host of different mediums.
Yep.
And I think in this case, the piece being more than simply a musical exercise, as you say, there's also a political element.
Yeah.
It's achieved in pretty much a perfect fashion, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I mean it's such a joy to hear choirs sing his music, all of his music. Anytime there's a new release out with inevitably some of the most beautiful choral music, he just really achieves something. And like you say, he achieves maybe musical political perfection with it. So he talked quite eloquently when the work was released with the Voices 8 recording about the fact that we're losing birds.
Yeah.
This is because we did a work last year, Vincent Ho's whimsical concerto Concerto for Whimsical Birds. Vince is going to hate me because I got the name wrong. Anyway, love you, Vince. But it was also about the disappearance of birds. We partnered with some researchers on the campus about it. Birds are disappearing.
Yeah.
Like it's at an alarming rate.
Yeah.
Like we sort of didn't notice for a while, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, where are the birds? Because there are just so many, so fewer than there were.
Yeah. Well, the initial, I think the subtitle of Lost Birds is An Extinction Elegy, if I'm remembering correctly.
That's correct.
And so the inspiration was the passenger pigeon, which is the greatest example of that, whose ranks were so numerous. There were so many passenger pigeons that a swarm would black out the sky. Yeah. And so then, of course, in not even necessarily in our arrogance, but I would say just in our lack of paying attention, over the course of time, I guess people primarily thought there'll be no problem with deforestation. There's so many of these birds. There'll be no problem with poaching. There'll be no problem with hunting for sport, these kinds of things. And then just one day there weren't passenger pigeons anymore. Yeah. And that's the quietness of that, the both literal and figurative, is really frightening. Yeah. And so that hopefully has served as a bit of a warning, a wake-up call. And I think that sentiment is what the composer is trying to capitalize upon with this piece.
Yeah, very much so. And to pairing it on top of the beautiful poetry, but also, like you say, the harmonic departures, those moments where he purposefully knows how to program us and move us emotionally. It is really a beautiful statement. It's funny, I grew up in southwest Saskatchewan on a farm, a long ways from town. And, I was thinking back, we had a bluebird in my backyard last year here in Saskatoon. And it was such a big deal. And then I got thinking about it,
That's weird to think about, isn't it?
When I was a kid, that wasn't that unusual. We get them.
They're
we get bluebirds. We get blue jays. We get gray jays. We get even we get slightly what I guess as a kid I thought of as rare birds, because they weren't the pigeon or the swallow. We had enough swallows, but even now swallows are disappearing. Right, the numbers returning to Capistrano each year are less and less. Yeah. We're seeing they're becoming even rarer. And, it's one of those things, we've been talking about the extinction and the elimination of animals for so long. I mean, for so long, decades now. Yeah. And like you say, it happened quietly, and things are becoming the dodo and we didn't even notice.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's partially that's human nature. There's always something that happens that's an emergency that we focus upon, and then then while we're looking at that, we're trying to solve that problem feverishly. Presuming that we are able to solve whatever problem that is, the next problem that comes up, if it doesn't have that same kind of five-alarm fire, aspect to it, sometimes it can creep up and be something serious before we've even noticed that it's really an issue. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting. What's that old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
May you live in interesting times. Yeah.
We are in interesting times.
Oh my goodness! Perhaps the most interesting. It's strange because, objectively, in many aspects, there has never been a greater time to be alive.
Correct.
I think that's indisputable, but it's also it's hard. There's no question, and to that end, one of the things that I like very much about this piece, which I mentioned to the orchestra in our rehearsal yesterday, is that it starts out and there's a sense of you could call it like an uplifting sense to begin with the orchestral overture, and then with the beginning first couple of texts with the choir. The whole piece is beautiful, but it gets progressively more sad, and it just happens in these
Gradually.
subtle little bits where by the end you realize in some of the music that you've heard, some of the themes that you've heard, they're now being presented to you literally as a eulogy.
Yeah.
And so it's only at the very end in which we have this last reiteration of the text, hope is this thing with feathers. And where I'm presuming, again, maybe I'm reading into it, but having spent a lot of time with it, I'm very confident that it's correct. That the idea is that this hope is that we can learn from this mistake, that we can, in fact, be resolute and action-oriented and, facing the right direction and tackling these very important problems head on, and just not letting them play out, because we're responsible whether if we don't do anything, inaction is also we're just as guilty. It's easier to sleep at night.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that applies to so much of our world.
Certainly.
That we are currently living in. It's funny, at the last concert, before the concert, I said to the audience, we can't ignore what's happening in our world today. Mm-hmm. We have a responsibility, actually, to not ignore. But, for the next 2 hours, drop your shoulders, relax into your seat, and just try to let the music help you escape it a bit.
Fill your cups.
And I do think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I actually think the world we are in today, post-pandemic, in its political era that it is, the shift of politics that's happened quite quietly over the last 15 years.
Quite loudly in the past week.
I was going to say, yeah, sure. The last month and a half has been very loud. But up to that point, it was relatively gentle. Yeah. And particularly not gentle in the last 4 days.
No.
It's taking a physical toll on us.
Certainly.
We were in the office last Friday when what happened on TV, and we all sort of stopped work and because you couldn't. We were at a point where you act like it was not only physically not possible because of the stress your body was experiencing, but also, it feels a tad silly you feel a little bit like you're moving the chairs on the Titanic.
Oh, sure.
It's like, let's just email about a concerto for 2 years from now. Yeah. What? Who cares? But I do actually think as the world moves ahead, we sort of need music more now than ever.
Well, this is the thing. It's just like in the face of it, every so often I think about it, just like, do I have any consequence at all? What am I doing? Am I a force for good? And it's not even sort of the thing to boost one's ego. It's just that you see people who do heroic things, and you see there are doctors saving lives, all these sorts of things, breakthrough research every day from just hugely committed, hardworking, incredibly hardworking people. And as someone who, being an artist it's the only thing I'm halfway good at, honestly. And so that's part of the reason why it's the career that I've chosen, but it's also something that's a calling. Yeah. And music and art sustains me. It's like the air I breathe. The downside of that is that you can be people like us. We can be in a place where those things cut even deeper. Yep. They cut very deeply. But I am a firm believer that talking about the shortcomings of people, again, extrinsic versus intrinsic benefits. While I didn't pull someone out of a burning building. I didn't affect political change. I didn't. You never know when people are coming in, what their state of mind could be, or what the state of their soul is, so to speak, and it can be very meaningful to provide enlightenment and wonder and surprise and discovery, to lift someone up in that regard. And this is a person, when I walk out on stage, I look at it, I take a bow, there's lights in my face. I don't see anything. No. There could literally, depending on the angle of those lights, there could literally be just a recording of someone applauding.
Yes.
And I would be like, okay, great, there are people out there. It's hard to see. So These are, it's like that for everyone on stage. But there might be someone in the back row who's having a very difficult day, and they have been lifted up through live performance, and that has made their day better. And then consequentially, what happens after that? I mean, who knows? But it's important to be able to certainly be vigilant about all these sorts of things and keep on top of it and be always take action. But you need to be fulfilled.
Yep.
And that's what this is all about. And so, again, on the face of it, yes, in the moment, it can certainly seem very strange to be going forward with certain things when just absolutely wild things happen politically that are completely outside of our control, of course. But that is power that I feel like we do wield in the orchestra to be able to make life better in a way that is in fact lasting for people who choose to be audience members.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
We're not saving people from burning buildings, but maybe actually, in a different way.
Well, and it's like, again, most people feel pretty powerless. It's if it's a foreign government is doing this or that and it has a direct effect on us, we didn't even vote for that. I mean, we're passengers in that bus. But at the same time, I really do feel as though being connected to one's spirit, being grateful and thankful for the many joys of life and for self-actualizing. These are the things that live musical performance can do. I really do think that they make us stronger.
Yep.
And are not just a balm against those sorts of. I don't like the idea myself of just like forget your troubles for 5 minutes, because the problem is your troubles don't go anywhere.
No.
However, if you are feeling better once you come out of a concert, part of that is because now you are potentially, you have greater resistance.
Yep.
I really believe that.
Yeah, I do too. Evan, I'm so thrilled you're here this week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful concert.
Oh, we're going to. There's no
We are
question.
going to, exactly. People are going to be deeply moved.
It's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.